Last night, of course, Joe Biden spoke to us as to the state of the union of this country. And the funny thing is, he mostly just prattled on about how bad things were, how they hope to achieve certain things, and in the end said, but don't worry, the state of the union is strong. Despite the fact he told us about a whole bunch of really bad things that he never actually solved. I mean, cancer being one of them, police brutality being another one. And then he kind of just ignored the fact that people are trying to smuggle eggs across the Mexican border into the U.S. because egg prices are so high. But okay, I get it. That's just eggs. We had this from the New York Post editorial. Biden's State of the Union set new record for dishonesty and emptiness. An argument they put forward. But you know what? The Daily Mail has the receipts. Biden repeats misleading claims he has created more jobs than any other president, has made the biggest deficit reduction in history, and is behind the drop in inflation. In State of the Union, Republicans slam as full of lies. Not to mention, the whole time, he's smashing, trashing Republicans throughout his speech. Some unity. The crazy thing is that when you look at the polls and you ask an independent voter or a Republican voter, they tend to agree. Hey, how's the economy? You know, it's not that good. Then you go and ask a Democrat and they're like, better than ever. And where does that information come from? You see, when it comes to the default Democrat voter, it seems that Joe Biden can say anything and they'll just believe it. As for the rest of us, we're at a disadvantage. You see, you have to convince a Republican or independent voter that you're right to earn their vote, whereas Democrats will vote just because they heard it. That is to say, Joe Biden and the Democrats can come out and say, hello, Democrat voter, the economy is good. And they'll be like, well, you got my vote. But you go to an independent or Republican, even as Donald Trump, and say, look, these are the best numbers of our lives. And they're going to say, well, I'm not entirely convinced. And because of that, it is much more difficult for independents and Republicans to win against Democrats, especially in Congress. And that's why, well, to be fair, ballot harvesting and ballot chasing is one of the principal reasons it's more difficult. But that's kind of the point, that you can go to a Democrat, knock on their door, say, fill this out, and they will. They don't know. They don't care. And I think they're dragging us all down. Unfortunately, here's what the New York Post had to say. State of the Union speeches are usually pretty scattershot. President Joe Biden's 2023 set a new record. He ranged across a world of issues without substantively addressing the biggest ones: crime, the border crisis, China, the nation's looming economic woes, because his record is so weak on all of them. Instead, he offered lie after lie in a shameless bid to fool the electorate ahead of his 2024 run for re-election. His only big idea is to make boogeymen out of the wealthy and offer the American people more freebies, more unsustainable spending. My favorite thing about his speech is he's basically like, people should have food. And they're like, yay. People should have health care. Like, yay. Like, you're not telling us how you will do these things. You are not telling us any kind of plan that will make things better. And you are ignoring the real problems in this country. He blended brags about his supposed achievements, promos for various dead-on-arrival bits of legislation, blatantly insincere calls for bipartisanship, cynical and false attacks on his opponents. The chamber was in uproar at his fake claim Republicans want to slash Social Security and Medicare. That was legit crazy. In his speech, we actually had his speech. It was leaked before he finished it. He says, Republicans are coming for Social Security and Medicare. And then the entire Republican side just starts booing. Liar, liar. Not true. But you know what? No one ever accused Joe Biden of being a good person. They go on to say, bogus stats. Billionaires pay roughly 24% income tax, not 8%. Some fine, tough talk on the Ukraine war, and utter laughers, as we made clear last week. If China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did, by shooting down the balloon at the last possible moment. That's right, when it was leaving U.S. territory and airspace. It had the now usual shout-outs to guests in the audience and the standard rah-rah patriotism, but he had literally no overall theme, as he has no overall vision beyond his self-serving distortions and promises or more giveaways. In his best chance to reach the entire nation, our president basically showed America that there's no there, except his trademark malarkey. His flagging polls show the American people aren't fooled. Just like Biden, they see his act as getting stale. And we saw this from the Washington Post ABC News poll. Around 62% of U.S. adults say they're not feeling the policies of Joe Biden. That is to say, he's not making their lives better. The Democrats are passing legislation, or trying to, and Biden is signing executive orders on ideological grounds. That's right. You want to talk about why gas prices went up, why they're higher now than they were under Trump? Because Joe Biden said explicitly in his campaign for president, we will get off fossil fuels, and then has the nerve to give a State of the Union address saying, we got to still have fossil fuels for some time. Wow, which is it? Did you finally come round, Biden? Or are you just lying? The funny thing is, people pointed out that as we were reading his speech before he did, he's just a puppet. Look, people write speeches. They have speech writers. Of course, President Biden has speech writers. But it is kind of sad that we knew exactly what he was going to say before he even said it. The Daily Mail takes it one step further. They say, Joe Biden used Tuesday night's State of the Union to tout his economic accomplishments, expresses optimism for the future, and urged Republicans to work with him. However, it became an unusually chaotic night as many Republicans loudly voiced their anger at some of Biden's claims, particularly over his administration's handling of the fentanyl crisis, with cries of liar, it's all your fault, and secure the border. That was another really great point where Joe Biden's going off saying, we got fentanyl. And then everyone yelled, the border. He won't secure it. He's basically ignored it. Why? Well, the argument is, in order to bolster economic numbers, they're trying to flood the zone with more low-skilled labor. So that creates demand for goods, and that creates more cheap labor to fulfill those demands. Instead of securing the border, bringing factories back to the United States, and maybe removing some regulations that make it harder for businesses to operate, their idea is just let people cross the border, but then you get drugs and human trafficking. But that, I guess, to Biden is a small price to pay so that he can fluff his numbers up and make it look like he's doing a good job on the economy, which he's not. It's a sad reality. But as I've described, this country is like the Titanic having hit an iceberg, and Joe Biden is making off with all the goods and telling everybody everything's fine. The State of the Union is strong. Meanwhile, in order to keep his economic numbers looking good, he's allowing people to flood the border, resulting in crime, gangs, cartels, trafficking, etc. Children are dying. But that's Joe Biden for you. Biden attempted to hit back and continued to call for bipartisanship. But the message that is set to underpin his likely re-election announcement was repeatedly attacked. Former President Donald Trump said, the good news is we are going to reverse every single crisis, calamity, and disaster that Joe Biden has created. I am running for president to end the destruction of our country and to complete the unfinished business of making America great again. There's Marjorie Taylor Greene with look at that stunning coat. Is that real fur? During at least 2 points of the speech, Republican lawmakers shouted, secure the border at the president. Pictured Marjorie Taylor Greene wearing all white, jeered at Biden several times throughout his speech. I'm kind of torn on the jeering. Joe Biden lied a lot, and I'm glad they yelled liar at him. At the same time, it's just all so plastic. Joe Biden comes out with his plastic face and his plastic surgery, and people sit around him, and we know who's going to say, it just doesn't feel real. But I'll tell you this, my friends, tonight, Timcast IRL will be live from the Capitol, like literally the building in Congress. And we're going to be talking with members of Congress. So this should be particularly interesting. Obviously, of course, the people we're going to be talking to are fans of ours and we are fans of theirs. So unfortunately, we're not going to get the likes of, say, AOC or anything like that. But it should still be enlightening and we can have a deeper conversation on some very interesting things happening today in Congress, but also the State of the Union. They go on to say, here we go. Eric Schmidt, senator for Missouri, said, I think it was a state of delusion, not a State of the Union. Here's a look at some of Biden's questionable claims. I love this one. Claims credit for 12 million new jobs, but ignores the COVID rebound. And this is something we pointed out live on IRL. You can't have Democrat governors shut down your state, destroying millions of jobs. Then when they reopen, say, you got 10 million jobs lost. Go, we made 8 million jobs. No, those jobs were always there. In fact, you lost 2 million. It's all manipulation. President Biden said, as I stand here tonight, we have created a record 12 million new jobs, more jobs created in 2 years than any president has ever created in 4 years. Biden has indeed created 12 million new jobs, but jobs created are not normally measured in 2 years. The tally is per presidency. Bill Clinton created 18.6 million over his 2 terms, and Ronald Reagan had 16.5 million. Not to mention the most important factor, he didn't really create jobs. COVID, the lockdown took jobs away. And when the lockdown ended, many people tried to refill these jobs. And over a 4-year period from 96 to 2000, Clinton's first and second terms, more than 12.4 million jobs were added. Biden has created slightly more than 500,000 jobs per month on average, or more than twice the rate of his closest competitor, Clinton. But he benefited from the post-pandemic bounce, and he still has time to go down. The longer presidents serve in office, the likelier it is they will encounter an economic downturn, obviously. And the job losses during economic downturns are what hamper the job creation averages for presidents. He brags about cutting deficit by $1.7 trillion, but doesn't mention no multi-trillion-dollar stimulus bill in 2022. Biden said, in the last 2 years, my administration has cut the deficit by $1.1 trillion, the largest deficit reduction in American history. Sorry, I had to slur because I'm not here to cover up for the failures of this old man. What bothers me about the media, and you've heard me say it before, is that for some reason, the media will translate the incomprehensible, garbled nonsense from the president because we think we know what he's trying to say, like Trinidad is having a pressure. Yet nobody knew what that was. Medicare care. But he came out last night and he said, if the Republicans try to arrest drugs, I'll veto it. And the Democrats all stand up and start clapping and cheering. And I'm like, my guy, you didn't say anything. What are the Democrats clapping for? Oh, I know. The speech was already leaked. They already knew what he was supposed to say. So they're clapping for what he was supposed to say, but couldn't. He was supposed to say, if Republicans try to raise the cost of prescription drugs, I will veto it. Instead, he said, if they try to raise the cost of prescription drugs, I'll veto it. And we all looked at each other here at IRL like, what did this man just try to say? Yeah, fortunately, we had a transcript. The president gets his $1.7 trillion figure by comparing the deficit in the fiscal year of 2020 with the deficit in 2022. The drop in the deficit is significant, but that too is missing context. Congress did not pass another multi-trillion-dollar stimulus bill in 2022 as it did in the previous 2 years. So it's not that he lowered the deficit. It's that the deficit was going down and he did not create a massive. So basically, you have a massive stimulus creating a massive deficit and then it's being paid down and then he doesn't do it again. So it starts reverting back to pre-pandemic levels. And as you can see, the deficit today is still higher than pre-pandemic. So actually worse. Here we go. He suggests the GOP wants to tear down Medicare and Social Security when McConnell and McCarthy have already shot down the idea. Biden said, instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset every 5 years. That means if Congress doesn't vote to keep them, those programs will go away. Biden is referencing a proposal made last year by Rick Scott, a Florida senator and chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Scott suggested sunsetting, reassessing all federal programs every 5 years. Gotta say, brilliant idea. I agree with it. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. He wrote on page 38 of his 60-page 11-point plan to rescue America, which offered 128 proposals. The Republican leaders of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, and House, Kevin McCarthy, have both said they have no intention of getting rid of Medicare and Social Security. Scott himself denied that was his intention, but that has not stopped it from becoming a Democrat talking point. And that's because Democrats are lying to you, and you're in a cult. And I beg you, please, to just Google search it. Kevin McCarthy gave a speech that says, we are not going to do this. It is not on our plan. It's not a plan we have. It would be political suicide to come out and target these programs. He didn't say that. I'm saying that. But they outright said, never going to happen. The Democrats just lied. And now their response will be, Republicans are lying. They really do want to do this. They're trying to trick you. Fine. But you can't come out and claim they have the goal of doing so when they've explained the opposite. You can come out and say, Republicans have stated they don't want to end Social Security or Medicare. But I think they're lying. That's not what Biden said. Biden said they do want to end this, and they said they will. Quite the opposite, actually. He's lying. Targets top firms over taxes, but uses questionable data. Biden said the idea that in 2020, 55 of the biggest companies in America made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal income taxes. That's simply not fair. Biden frequently uses this statistic. It's not necessarily wrong, but it's not entirely accurate either. The number is not based on actual tax returns, but instead in an estimate of taxes paid based on corporate reports. All right, let's break down the taxes argument. For one, They are all paying taxes. It's impossible not to. You have property taxes. You have sales taxes. You have import taxes. You have a lot. Did I say employment? You have an employee, you got to pay the federal government an employee tax. So they're paying taxes. Now, are you talking about corporate profits? Are they paying taxes on corporate profits? Well, there's two things to consider. One, yes, they do pay taxes on profits. But did the corporation have any profits this year? Are you specifically saying that they made $40 billion in profits this year? And how many are you arguing did not pay taxes? He says 55 of the biggest companies in America made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal income taxes. Federal income taxes. That's an important one. Okay. I got to break this one down for you because this is a big lie. What kind of corporation is it? Is it an S Corp? Is it a C Corp? C Corps are going to pay taxes. S Corps are pass-through entities, and they're not. An S Corp is going to pass through the profits to the principals of this organization, who will then personally pay the taxes. So you can talk about a company generating profit. The profit then transfers to the individual who is liable for those taxes. There's all sorts of tricks they have to lie about this. Additionally, are there federal incentive programs so that these corporations can invest in an area, generate profit, but generate more peripheral taxes? Give you an example. Amazon wanted to set up a warehouse in New York. They were going to generate around about $10 billion a year in tax revenue. They were going to receive a tax break. Now, AOC and others come out and say, but they're not going to pay their fair share. Here's what happens. A local jurisdiction, and this is possible for us even in West Virginia, we'll see. West Virginia needs jobs. They need economic stimulus. This is hypothetical, by the way. I've not talked to West Virginia about any of this. They need economic stimulus. There may be an opportunity zone in West Virginia. Its economy is falling into disrepair. People are losing their jobs, and it's becoming dangerous for the people who live there. They can't support themselves. So along comes a company, and they say, we're going to be setting up a new office with 100 employees. We would love to build in this area. It's an opportunity zone. The government says to the corporation, we will waive taxes for X amount of years if you build here. Why? You build here. You hire 100 people, an average salary of $70,000 a year. All of that income now will go to the individuals who will be paying taxes, income taxes, and you as a corporation will be paying employment taxes. At the state level, it's probably a bit lower, but you're getting a deal paying lower taxes, but it means that the state is generating more tax revenue because your company wouldn't have been there if they didn't offer this to you. The federal government does similar things. Is that what he's talking about? I'm not saying I know for sure. I'm saying the Democrats will lump all of it in together and then claim that when the federal government says, we will give you a $4 billion tax break to build solar power plants, then the company says, okay, we will make our power supply for our factory solar power based if you give us these tax breaks. The federal government says yes, then they get a tax rebate. The corporation then doesn't pay on that $4 billion, and then Democrats come out and say they're not paying their fair share. It's like a bait and switch. There's no way the U.S. government, the IRS, would let major corporations get away with this. It's just nuts. Oh, and here we go. The latest COVID death figures. Biden said, well, the virus is not gone. Thanks to the resilience of the American people, we have broken COVID's grip on us. Biden is correct. As of this week, the 7-day average of COVID deaths is down nearly 90%. In the week of January 20th, 2021, there were 3,000 deaths. Last week, there were 472, a decline of 84%. Yet, that is not the whole picture. Numbers so far this year are much higher than a low of 168 reached in October. That's the game he's playing. Claims inflation victory despite decrease mainly being down to global factors and not policies. Well, what did you expect from this? Republicans boo Biden. MTG calls him a liar. And Kevin McCarthy shakes his head as president claims GOP wants to sunset Medicare and Social Security in State of the Union, where he barely mentions China and spars with hecklers. The speaker was sitting right behind him, and he shook his head no. What does that mean to the American people? A default liberal individual watching this speech hears him say this. Kevin McCarthy shakes his head no. They may be thinking, well, he's shaking his head no, that it's wrong for them to do that. It's wrong. That's not what he should have done. He should have said lies, not true. Lies, not true. And made sure he mouthed it perfectly. That is not true. We will not. Kevin McCarthy could do a better job, but Joe Biden's a liar, so I'm not mad at Kevin. You know, he shook his head. It is what it is. It is what it is. You can see it wasn't just Marjorie Taylor Greene heckling, but they love to single her out because she's famous. Biden pushed back and pointed his finger at Republicans in the audience during the remarks and started with a gaffe and off-script off-script jokes. The row escalated when Biden blamed the nation's debt on Trump. How did Congress respond to that debt? They lifted the debt ceiling 3 times without preconditions or crisis. That's not a good thing. Yeah, this country is just being gutted. Oh, Marjorie yelling, giving a thumbs down. At least somebody's doing it. As the shouting continued, the president responded, "I'm glad to see it. I enjoy conversation." The whole time, he's talking about bipartisanship. He's talking about coming together. But he was lying. He was accusing the Republicans of things they aren't doing, getting rid of Social Security and Medicare. And he was insulting them. So they booed him. He was blaming major problems on policy and acting like they were doing a good job when they weren't. No, the border is the perfect example. He wants to increase economic numbers artificially by allowing people to flood the zone, which is bad in the long run. Short-term gains to gain political power. That, my friends, was the State of the Union. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.